Israel is on the fast track for absolute victory. And so obviously, the United States is suing for an immediate ceasefire. I'll have all the details coming up on In Focus. All right, it's great to be back after a week away. I just want to give a shout out to some of the very fine people that I met with while I was in the United States. Dr. Bob Shillman in San Diego, Pastor Mario Bramnick, Tony Perkins, and Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann in Washington, who are undertaking an incredible project with many important and extraordinary Christian leaders to put together a conference of presidents of Christian Zionist organizations. And I was very, very proud and happy to be present at the creation, the launch of this incredible endeavor on their part. So Godspeed to all of you. I want to say hi again to John Catsimatidis in New York and David Goodside from the Beach Cafe, very cool place. And of course to my peripatetic organizer, Phil Jacobs, for making it all happen in New York City. So without ado, having given out the shout outs and thanks to everybody who helped me along the way over the past week. Let's start with the war here. Why not? Because we got back. It's war. I went away. It was war, but in a different situation. So for decades, the Israeli left, including our post-Zionist retired generals, the United States, Europe, the UN, particularly France, and the Arabs have all said that Israel cannot defeat Hezbollah. It's just too powerful. As Hezbollah says, we have everything that Iran has, which is true because Hezbollah isn't a Lebanese organization. It was established by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in 1982 from breakouts from Amal and other Shiite militia. And it is a division of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in Lebanon. It's absolutely an Iranian organization. It's run by Iran. It's directed by Iran. Hezbollah operatives train in Iran. And again, there's just this constant cross-generation of technologies, of innovations, and of arms, and of drugs, and of everything else that they do with Hezbollah and IRGC. They are one. So Hezbollah is an arm of the Revolutionary Guard Corps that controls Lebanon. It's a terror group that swallowed a country. It's basically Lebanon is a forward operating base of the Revolutionary Guard Corps against Israel that happens to have 4 million residents living in it, as my friend Tony Badran of Tablet Magazine has said to me. And that's true. But everybody said it's so powerful, there's no way that little Israel can possibly be a match for Hezbollah. And as a result, we believed them. Everybody said it. So we took it on the chin. They shot missiles apropos nothing at Kiryat Shmona, at Metula, at military bases, wherever. Along the years, they put a tent in Mount Dov in the Golan Heights, before the war started, and everybody said, we can't do anything. If we do something, all hell is going to break loose, and we're not going to be able to manage it. It's going to be too hard. The Biden administration shoved this maritime border deal down the throat of the previous government 2 weeks before the election, where they said, if you want to protect your gas installation, right, your gas industry, Israel, which is all off the Mediterranean coastline, well, it's all contingent on you giving your territorial waters, your economic waters, including a suspected gas deposit to Hezbollah as part of a border demarcation deal. The fact that Hezbollah, Lebanon, had no valid claims to any of the waters, totally immaterial. Everybody referred to it as a win-win. Israel gets to not see its gas industry destroyed, and Hezbollah gets Israeli territory apropos of nothing, plus a gas deposit, which had it actually been shown to have natural gas, was going to be worth at least $1 billion to Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon. So that was a way, basically, of giving Iran $1 billion through their Lebanese proxy force, Hezbollah. That's a whole thing. So the United States mediated this deal. They served as Hezbollah's enforcer, forcing Yair Lapid, the hapless, totally pathetic interim prime minister who never met an American demand that he wouldn't, bow down before. And they forced him to accept this deal that no Israeli in their right mind could possibly have accepted as chief negotiator, quit in the middle. Anyway, we did it and everybody called it a win-win. It was pure extortion. And when the war started here, everybody was saying, well, Israel, you're going to have to make a deal with Hezbollah. Yeah, it's true. The people who live in northern Israel, particularly along the border with Lebanon, that number around 100,000. These people who have been internal refugees inside of Israel, displaced persons inside of their own country for going on a year. Well, you'll cut a deal like the maritime border deal along your land border. You'll cough up a bit of your sovereign territory, including Mount Dov and the Golan Heights, which controls all of northern Israel completely, like from the Gulf of Haifa up to the Golan Heights and all of the Galilee, the lower, the western, the upper, all of it. Hezbollah then controls completely with Mount Dov. You'll give them that little slice of land. No big deal. They call it the Sheva Farms to make it sound like a nice little idyllic farm with a white picket fence or something to people who aren't paying attention. You'll give them that, and everything will be fine. And then they'll definitely, implement UN Security Council Resolution 1701 from 2006. And here I just want to open a parenthesis. What is UN Security Council Resolution 1701 from 2006? That was the ceasefire deal that ended the Hezbollah's war against Israel in 2006. And the deal required the state of Lebanon to remove all Hezbollah forces to north of Litani River. So that's about up to 30 kilometers north of the Israeli border, and not allow any of them to recede. And the Lebanese armed forces, together with a UN force in South Lebanon called UNIFIL, were supposed to be extra powerful, and they were the only forces that were supposed to be allowed to patrol the border between Israel and Lebanon. And in the event, what happened was Hezbollah killed a couple of UNIFIL soldiers around 2007, 2008, and that was the end of UNIFIL. They never go on any patrols without getting Hezbollah's permission beforehand, and usually they're accompanied by Hezbollah, so it's all a lie. And the Lebanese armed forces was already providing targeting information to Hezbollah during the 2006 war. They've never been an independent entity. And after the war, they basically just became an auxiliary force of Hezbollah. And so they never implemented 1701. To the contrary, they were the reason, they were sort of the fig leaf behind which Hezbollah was able to hide, to have plausible deniability as it went about not only rebuilding its missile bases in South Lebanon and its forces, they embedded their forces directly into the civilian life of South Lebanon. So we hear about the Radwan Force, which is an army of 20,000 regular forces and 20,000 reservists that are all battle-hardened veterans of the terror wars that Hezbollah has waged in Iraq, in Syria. They have just rivers of American blood on their hands, rivers of British blood on their hand, rivers of Afghan blood on their hand, river of Iraqi blood on their hand, rivers of Syrian blood on their hands, and now they're perched on the side on Israel's border, right? And they're ready to invade. That's what they've been trained to be, is an invasion force into Israel. And the idea, and so what they did was they gave them all apartments in these newly built apartment blocks in South Lebanon. Moreover, they built missile rooms inside of each flat so that everybody who got a new apartment from Hezbollah was also had an extra room. We have an extra room in every house for our shelter, and it's called a mamad, and it's a reinforced room, and every structure since the Gulf War in 1991 has been required by law to have a secure room inside of it. It saved arguably thousands of Israeli lives, this requirement by law. So we have rooms that protect us from missiles, and Hezbollah has missile rooms to attack Israel in every apartment that they built in Lebanon since 2006. So 1701, which is a binding, UN Security Council resolution, that was a ceasefire from the end of the war. It was never, ever implemented on the Lebanese side, and nobody ever objected, nobody other than Israel. And who cares what Israel's doing, right? So the United States never objected. France never objected. The UN Security Council never raised any objection. The UN never objected. Nobody ever objected. The Lebanese, who are controlled by Hezbollah, never objected. Nobody ever objected except Israel to the fact that 1701 wasn't even remotely being implemented on the Lebanese side of the border, not even a little bit, okay? So that just, what did I say? That was a parenthetical remark. But this year, what happened? So after they were already in constant breach, both in terms of rebuilding their forces and in deploying their forces, and then in taking potshots at Israel and other acts of aggression that they carried out against Israel pretty much regularly since 2006 until 2023. On October 8th, apropos of nothing, with no provocation whatsoever from Israel, Hezbollah decided that they were going to join Hamas's war against Israel, that war that Hamas began with a genocide of the communities of South Israel that day. The next day, Hezbollah began massive rocket and missile fire against Israeli communities in the north. And that obviously, and even beforehand, increased fear that the Radwan Brigade, that had been training for precisely the operation that Hamas had carried out the day before, were about to invade Metula and Kiryat Shmona and Nahariya and Shlomi and all the kibbutzim along the border, Lenara, Kfar Giladi, etc. So the army and the government ordered the evacuation of the civilians from many of the communities. It was initially, I think it was around 60. Now it's 70, or sometimes some estimates say 100,000 have left. Now even more because the escalation of the firing. But you're talking about tens of thousands, anywhere between 60,000 and 100,000 Israelis have been living outside of their homes for the past year. Right? Because it's too dangerous, because they can invade at any moment, because they have 20 to 40,000 short-range rockets and another 40,000 short-range missiles that together can just demolish completely their communities, massacre everybody inside them, including the soldiers that are supposed to be defending them. So, the firepower is just so outrageous that there's no way that anybody can live there so long as this threat continues to persist. And Hezbollah, apropos of nothing, did this. And Israel, because we had our main concentration of force has been in Gaza to decimate Hamas's forces there after they invaded on October 7th. So Hezbollah was attacking Israel with anywhere between a dozen to 24 rockets and missiles a day. And we'll get to that in a second. They got to 8,000 in total by mid-September, right, when things started shifting here. So 8,000 missiles a day over a period of about 300 days. So you're talking about two, 3 rockets a day on average, and sometimes less, sometimes more. In recent weeks, we were having 50 to 100 rockets being shot in a very, very steep escalation of the number. But all told, you've had the decimation of communities, hundreds of homes destroyed. You've had significant damage caused to military installations, some of them strategic. You've had just the devastation of the landscape, of the trees, of the forests, of the nature reserves, of the animals. So you've had all of this devastation going on. And how has Israel been responding? Well, when our concentration of effort is in Gaza, so we've been responding with attacking missile launchers, attacking other things, but all from the air. We haven't devoted any ground forces to it. And it's all been a very limited response of intercepting the incoming missiles and rockets when possible. It's very difficult to intercept the short-range anti-tank rockets. And when not possible, we just suffer the damage. So that's been Israel's response. And then after they started escalating significantly, steeply, the number of rockets from a dozen to 24 a day, which is what it had been through the summer months, to 50 to 120 a day, that was when we started seeing Israel do something new. So last week, we saw a lot of new things. And this was, and let's just go through some of them. We had Operation Exploding Beeper. We had Operation Exploding Walkie-Talkies. We had Operation Let's Decapitate the leadership of the Radwan brigades in a bombing of a subterranean bunker in an apartment building in the Dakhia quarter of Beirut, where Hezbollah leaders all live. So you had these three major strikes, and then you started having massive airstrikes that were taking out, I think we had 1,400 hits in one day that took out, and all of them apparently hit their targets. And we're talking about missile storage facilities, missile launchers, long-range missile launchers, short-range missile launchers. So we took out an enormous amount of their arsenal. Not all of it, but according to one diplomatic official, Israel has destroyed about a half of the long-range missiles and about 3/4 of the short-range missiles that Hezbollah had on the eve of the war. So that's a lot. And what is most important that the source said, and this was in the aftermath of the massive air campaign that began a couple of days ago, said that the most important thing that Hezbollah has lost is their ability to launch in a coordinated manner hundreds of rockets and missiles simultaneously. And that, of course, had been all along their strategic concept, which was that they were going to be able to paralyze Israel's anti-missile defense systems, the David Sling and the Iron Dome, by swarming Israel with hundreds and hundreds of projectiles at once. So what we found yesterday, the day before, etc., is that Hezbollah is extending the range of the firings much more to the area around Haifa and the Gulf of Haifa, the Lower Galilee, the Jezreel Valley. There was one intercepted over Tel Aviv yesterday, Tuesday. So we've had an increase in the number of hits, but we haven't seen hundreds of them at once. We've seen over 100 shot at Israel in a day, but we haven't seen 600. And it's not for lack of desire. It's not that Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah doesn't want to go ahead with this. He clearly does. But as the diplomatic official speaking to the media said, he no longer has the capacity to carry out that kind of coordinated attack. He doesn't have commanders here. Just look at this graphic. See how Israel has decimated the senior leadership ranks of Hezbollah. It's just an important, just look at it for a second. Look at how many are gone, right? They've got nobody. Basically, it's Hassan Nasrallah and one guy, right? That's it. And by the way, the beeper attack, so we're talking about something like 2,600 mid-level and senior Hezbollah and Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps operatives in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. They all came out, which just shows that this is all one organization. They're using the same beepers, right? They're getting the same announcements, right? So they are out of commission. They either lost their eyes when they're looking at it, lost their hands. They can't fight anymore, or, lost their privates. Apparently, about 1,000 of them, they'll get up to heaven or hell or whatever with their 72 virgins, and the 72-year-old virgins will just be laughing at them. At any rate, we're talking about a significant diminution of the Hezbollah war fighting capabilities. And so, obviously, this is causing some degree of euphoria and elation among Israelis, because what we're seeing is that when Netanyahu promised absolute victory, he might not have been making an empty promise, right? Everybody saw how, the media and the retired generals and the Americans, Biden and Blinken and others and Tom Friedman, they've all been condemning Netanyahu for insisting on absolute victory. What is he talking about? You can't have absolute victory. It's a lie. He's trying to rally the people behind him for his own political interests by giving them a lie that they can achieve absolute victory. It's totally not true. It's total nonsense. There's no way. We have to cut a deal, right? And the deal we're supposed to cut is the deal that Amos Hochstein wants us to cut, which keeps coming back here and demanding that we give Hezbollah Mount Dov, because how else are you going to get them to agree to something which they're not going to implement because there's no enforcement and nobody will ever ask him to, right? So what we're seeing here, it's not just hypocrisy, it's incredible hostility of the United States and, of course, of the rest of the so-called international community, Emmanuel Macron and the UN and all of them, right? Because for, what is it now? It's 18 years. Hezbollah has systematically breached the spirit and the letter of 1701, as has Lebanon, which is, it's almost worthless to talk about Lebanon because there's no such state as Lebanon. It is a forward operating base of the Revolutionary Guard Corps that has 4 million people living on it who call themselves Lebanese and pretend that they live in a country. They don't live in a country. They live on a forward operating base of the Revolutionary Guard Corps against Israel, right? But whatever. So Lebanon, right, has never fulfilled its promise in 1701. They never blocked Hezbollah from rebuilding its capacities, for rebuilding its control over South Lebanon. They never even tried, right? So it never happened, and there was never an outcry from America. There was never an outcry from Italy. There was never an outcry, of course, from France. There was never an outcry from the Security Council. There was never an outcry from the Arab states. There was never an outcry from the Lebanese people. There was never an outcry from Syria. There was never an outcry from anybody, right? But now suddenly, oh, wait, Israel is causing real damage to Hezbollah, and they may actually defeat them. If we have 5, according to the media reports yesterday, we have 5 divisions now perched on the border, along with 2 maneuver brigades that were just called up for reserves and emergency orders. So we have a very, very significant ground force perched on the border when they're not, practicing, ready to invade. We have Hezbollah down, right? Their commanders have been killed. Their capacity to coordinate has been killed. And we're slamming the rat trails from Syria to Lebanon that have been bringing a steady supply, replenishment of missiles into Lebanon to block resupply, sort of like an aerial version of Israel's ground control over the Philadelphia corridor that connects Egypt with Gaza, right? So here we're blocking the rat trails through constant military pressure from the air, right? They can't get resupplied. They can't regroup. They can't reorganize. They're down. And so obviously the time to take them out is now. Now is the time that we've set the conditions, right? We've softened the targets. We've made it impossible for them to conduct the kind of strategic operation that they intended to conduct against Israel that would paralyze our defenses and render our communities essentially helpless, both to ground invasion and massacre and to being pulverized by their 200,000 missiles and rocket ballistic precision and non-precision guided rockets and missiles, all pointing directly at Israeli territory, right? So now is the time to go. And instead, all of the people who stood silently by and said nothing all of these years when Hezbollah built up its power and its strength in breach of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 are all joining together to say Israel needs to have a ceasefire. And here, let's just read a couple of these obscene statements. So here you have a joint statement from President Biden and President Macron. President Macron, of course, he was one of the really pathetic people who condemned the beeper attack, even though, among the people who were killed this was, I guess, the hit against the Radwan Brigade commanders, but all the same. Ibrahim Akil, who has the blood of 64 French paratroopers on his hands from the bombing of their mission in 1983, not to mention 243 Marines and another 62 people who were killed in the U.S. Embassy bombings that he was involved in, right? He was wanted. There was a $7 million price on his head, and the Americans didn't know what to say, right? They should have said thank you, right? And so should the Arabs, because Hezbollah threatens them too. The Europeans, by the way, should be saying thank you also, because Hezbollah threatens them. There are Hezbollah cells literally all over the world. They operate in every country in Europe. They operate throughout Latin America. They operate in Asia, right? And they operate in America, right? And they operate here. And so if Israel is able to destroy Hezbollah where it lives in Lebanon, then everybody else is going to be much more secure. Because what are they going to do in Argentina without the mothership in Lebanon supplying them? All of this is the world's war against Islamic Jihad, and Israel is fighting it, and we're about to win it. And the nations of the world, here is this press release for a joint statement by President Biden and Emmanuel Macron. It says, it is time for a settlement on the Israel-Lebanon border that ensures safety and security to enable civilians to return to their homes. The exchange of fire since October 7th, and in particularly over the past 2 weeks, threatens a much broader conflict and harm to civilians. We therefore have worked together in recent days on a joint call for a temporary ceasefire to give diplomacy a chance to succeed and avoid further escalations across the border. The statement we have negotiated is endorsed by the United States, Australia, Canada, European Union, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. We call for broad endorsement and for the immediate support of the governments of Israel and Lebanon. And let me just read you the second one. It's a joint statement by the United States, Australia, Canada, European Union, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. The situation between Lebanon and Israel since October 8th, 2023 is intolerable and presents an unacceptable risk of a broader regional escalation. This is in nobody's interest, neither of the people of Israel nor the people of Lebanon. It is time to conclude a diplomatic settlement that enables civilians on both sides of the border to return to their homes in safety. Diplomacy, however, cannot succeed amidst an escalation of this conflict. Thus, we call for an immediate 21-day ceasefire across the Lebanon-Israel border to provide space for diplomacy towards the conclusion of a diplomatic settlement consistent with UNSCR 1701, UN Security Council Resolution 1701, and the implementation of UNSCR 2735 regarding a ceasefire in Gaza. We call on all parties, including the governments of Israel and Lebanon, to endorse the temporary ceasefire immediately, consistent with UNSCR 1701 during this period, and to give a real chance for a diplomatic settlement. We are then prepared to fully support all diplomatic efforts to conclude an agreement between Israel and Lebanon within this period, building on efforts over the last months that ends this crisis altogether. So here's the deal, right? Of course, there's no mention here of the two main engines behind everything that has been happening. First, Iran, which is the grand master of everything. They're Iran's boss. They're Hezbollah's boss. They're the Houthis' bosses. They're the bosses of the militia in Iraq. They're the bosses of the Palestinian terrorists in Judea and Samaria. And Syria. Obviously, they control Syria. No mention of Iran. You know, the Iranian president right now is sitting happy, giving interviews to CNN, attacking Israel, doing whatever he wants, right? In New York City, everybody loves him, right? And nobody's saying anything to him. In fact, you saw the head of the IAEA going into his hotel room, staying there. Who knows what they're doing? He's probably negotiating a new nuclear deal, right, to help Iran cross the nuclear finish line with minimal fuss, you know. So you had that. You have no mention of Iran. No mention of Iran. And then the other group, what about Hezbollah, right? No mention of the fact that Hezbollah, with the support of the Lebanese government, has been conducting unprovoked, unwarranted, illegal assaults against Israeli civilian targets and military targets with no reason, and as a war crime because they're doing it hidden behind civilians, right? All of this they've been doing since October 7th. No mention of Hezbollah, not one. All of the attention is placed on Israel and all of the demand, the sudden hyperventilating, we need a ceasefire now. Why? Because Israel sees absolute victory in its sights. We're going after we're on the offensive. We seized the initiative for the first time since we withdrew from South Lebanon in 24 years ago in 2000. We finally have the initiative. We're calling the shots. We're running the field. So we have to stop. If they shoot at us, if they kill 10 Israeli children playing soccer in Majd al-Shams in the Golan Heights, it's a tragedy, condemnation, but no immediate ceasefire. Israel has to give them Mount Dov. Israel has territory that's its sovereign territory that it's supposed to cough up, right, in order to get a ceasefire that's not going to be maintained that nobody's going to enforce against Hezbollah, the force that nobody even names, right? Along with its boss, Iran, which nobody even names. It's their war against Israel, and Israel is supposed to be the one standing down, not them. They don't even get condemned. So you have all of the nations joining together, demanding a ceasefire. And what's funny about Israel's response is that you're getting a big no way across the board. Like if you listen to the Israeli media when they report, first of all, Prime Minister Netanyahu, as I speak to you, is on his way to New York to go to the UN General Assembly. I guess it's under the, concept, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're the main course. Well, Israel's been the main course all week. All anybody has done at the UN is attack and condemn Israel. I may do a separate show on that. I don't know if I have. I don't know if I will, or just make me nauseated. But whatever. So he's on his way there to read everybody the Riot Act, right? And so what did the Americans do? Like 2 minutes after he gets on his flight or wheels up, the Americans announced that a ceasefire has been reached. But nobody agreed to a ceasefire, and it took several hours for the prime minister in his plane going to New York to get out a statement from the plane that no, in fact, Israel had agreed to no ceasefire deal, and he left the country with orders in the hands of the military that they have to continue to fight with maximum power, as they have been for the past week. It was all a lie, but the United States puts this out. And before the prime minister could say it's not true, you had, and I'm talking across the political spectrum, people denouncing the idea that Israel is going to stand down. And why is that? It's because it's so blatantly obvious that we can't. That if people are supposed to be allowed to return to their home, it's not under a security guarantee of the UN or Hezbollah or the Biden administration. It's only the IDF that can protect the citizens of Israel in their homes. And the only way we can do that is by taking those 5 divisions that are perched on the border and moving into Lebanon and securing a security zone in Lebanon. Right now, northern Israel is Hezbollah's security zone, preventing Israel from using, a third of its territory with any security whatsoever. They're the ones that are threatening our refineries and our chemical plants and our natural gas installations, platforms, and our people. Right? They're the ones, not us. We didn't threaten Lebanon. We left Lebanon 24 years ago. I would say stupidly, but all the same, you can't deny we don't want anything from Lebanon. But they never, ever accepted any ceasefire with us. They continued attacking us from the minute that we left. And they've reached this point where they came together with 200,000 rockets and missiles of all ranges, capable of hitting every site in Israel more than once, right? And we're told that we're supposed to stand down and let them rebuild, because what is 21 days? Hamas would give, I don't know how many hostages in order to get a 21-day ceasefire from Israel, because what are they going to do? Well, is Israel going to be able to bomb the rat light? No. Are they lying on their backs panting and hysterical because everybody around them is dead? Yes. So in 21 days, you get to calm down. You get to replenish your stocks from Iran going through Syria and Iraq, right? You get all your missiles rebuilt, regrouped. You're able to, get in the replacements for all the people who are dead and get your lines organized, right? And then you're back and you're ready. You're in the driver's seat again. So why would Israel agree to this? Because Iran wants it? Iran wants it, right? And so those are the ones who are asking for it. Iran, Hezbollah, they suddenly want it. We get them by the throat and they say, ceasefire, ceasefire. And then the entire world comes in and says, yes, yes, ceasefire. And, and I wish that was all that the Biden administration was doing. But unfortunately, it's not. Senator Cotton and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell wrote a letter to the White House where they were talking about the fact that the United States is continuing their partial arms embargo against Israel. And I just want to play a clip from Tom Cotton and Jake Tapper talking about what it is that the United States is denying us. So let's just go to Senator Cotton for a second.
Israel has every right to defend itself and to go on offense against a terrorist organization in Lebanon, and we need to give them the tools to defeat both Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north and defend their own people.
Is the United States not giving tools that Israel needs?
No. First off, they're not giving them the political and diplomatic support that they needed from the very beginning. If rather than trying to put constant pressure on Israel, more pressure than we put on Iran and its terrorist networks, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had simply adopted a policy to let Israel win and back them to the hilt, the war in Hamas probably would have ended a long time ago. Earlier this year, there was a de facto partial arms embargo on Israel, not just the 2,000-pound bombs, which they do need to hit Hamas in its deep and buried tunnels, but mortar rounds and artillery shells and small arms ammunition. Now they even have a tractor embargo in Israel. So Israeli soldiers are going to be exposed to minefields that can't be cleared because the Biden-Harris administration won't allow them to get access to the tractors and the bulldozers they need to clear those minefields. So consistently, the Biden-Harris administration has put more pressure on Israel than it has put on Israel's enemies. That's probably had the effect of prolonging the fight.
Right. So they're denying us the MK-84 bombs, which are the bunker buster bombs that Kamala Harris has already said she's so excited that she's not giving us. The Apache attack helicopters, which you need for they're essential for fighting in Lebanon. They're worth, like a battalion of tanks. They can save so many lives of Israelis because they're perfect for that trait. No, you're not going to get it. Can't have that. Caterpillar D9 tractors. Yeah, let's just make Israelis die in landmines because, AOC wants to boycott Caterpillar if they continue. Because the left sucks and because they politicized, these armaments that are going to Israel because they're effective in fighting terrorism. So suddenly they're not allowed. Right? Because you don't even mention Hezbollah and Iran when you're talking about a ceasefire between Lebanon, which is the aggressor, which they controlled and swallowed whole, decades ago. You don't even mention them. By the way, they're not mentioned in 1701 either. That was Condoleezza Rice, a diplomatic genius, along with her junior partner, Tzipi Livni, who was the most incompetent foreign minister Israel has ever had. At any rate, so that's what we have with them. We have an arms embargo, but that's not it. Because they're also looking forward. They want to make sure that we know that they hate us, right? So this week, President Biden met with the president of the UAE, Mohammed bin Zayed, MBZ. And then what do they talk about? Two-state solution is the only framework for resolving the conflict, Biden and UAE later say after meeting. What's interesting about this write-up is that they talk about, the framework for two-state solution. And one of the things that they mentioned there was the Arab Peace Initiative. It says here, this is their statement. It says the leaders expressed their commitment to the two-state solution, wherein a sovereign and contiguous Palestinian state lives side by side in peace and security with Israel as the only way to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in accordance with internationally recognized parameters in the Arab Peace Initiative. What's so interesting is that the Arab Peace Initiative is like this joke. It's not a joke. It's a racket. In 2002, Thomas Friedman basically made it up during a visit with the Saudi King Fahd. And the Arab Peace Initiative, it was later in the middle of Israel's counterterrorism offensive in Judea and Samaria in April of 2002. You had this meeting in Beirut of the Arab League, and this fake plan that essentially Tom Friedman wrote was adopted as the Arab Peace Initiative. And what is this plan? The plan is that Israel withdraws from Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, at the time Gaza, that we allow unrestricted immigration of foreign-born Arabs in the millions to Israel under the so-called right of return, that we kick all of the Jews living in Judea and Samaria, Jerusalem, and back then Gaza, out of their homes. That's now over 800,000 people, and, transfer it all to the Arabs. And the foreign-born Arabs coming in under the right of return, they can live anywhere they want. In other words, all the Arab Peace Initiative is a way of overrunning Israel and destroying it. And so they're saying that, the basis of the two-state solution is a plan for Israel's dissolution, for Israel's dismantlement, for Israel's annihilation. And it just, why not? Because it's true. A two-state solution is, in fact, the final solution to the Jewish problem in the land of Israel. You want Israel to be destroyed? All right, we'll see what happened when you had a mini Palestinian state in Gaza on October 7th. They committed a genocide of the Jewish communities of the Gaza envelope on October 7th. That's what happened. Imagine if you have that, 100, 200-fold in Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem. You know exactly what would happen. By the way, so do they, which is why they said the Arab Peace Initiative. They're not even trying to hide the fact that they're doing this because they don't actually support Israel. And that's not all. You had this report by Joseph Magid in the Times of Israel where he was talking about all of these steps that the administration is thinking about undertaking to punish Israel in the lame duck 3 months between November 5th, the presidential elections, and January 20th, the inauguration. Some of them they'll do under, if Kamala wins, some of them they'll do presumably under if Trump wins. But basically they involve sanctioning. I think we talked about it. They want to use the executive order that Biden put out on February 1, which does the unprecedented thing of sanctioning citizens of an allied Western democracy, Israel, for doing nothing illegal, but simply opposing the administration's policy. In this case, it's policy to establish a Palestinian state. So they've already placed 13 Israeli citizens, one of whom is also an American citizen, under sanctions with no due process, with them having committed no crime under any law, including U.S. law. They're simply not supporting American policy of supporting whether it's the Palestinians in Gaza or the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, with the hopes of making them a sovereign state there. So they're being sanctioned. This is arguably unlawful, which is why it's being challenged in a federal court in Texas. But now they want to widen the sanctions and sanction 2 cabinet ministers, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, because both of them are outspoken opponents of Palestinian statehood, and they think that you should be allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. Or if they don't sanction them, then they'll sanction two businesses in Israel, the Amanah organization and the Nachala organization, whose crime is that they legally build homes for Jews in Judea and Samaria, and you can't have that, so they'll get sanctioned. And then they have one that's funny, which is a memorandum of understanding about U.S. military assistance to Israel. So that's supposed to end, I think, in about 2 years. So in a way, this doesn't matter. But if there was supposed to be initially 25% of the money could go to Israeli military industries to produce armaments in Israel, and it's supposed to disappear by the end of the 10-month period. At any rate, they want to end that so that Israel has to use 100% of the military assistance in the United States, which with an eye towards destroying Israel's independent industrial capacity to provide for our own defense. And what's funny about this is that perhaps the one personal victory that I can claim in this war is that for over a decade, I was saying that Israel has to wean itself off of U.S. military assistance and rebuild our domestic capabilities. And every time that we either gave a technology to the United States to produce for us, like Iron Dome, or now it's a laser technology, I would start screaming on TV and saying, what are we doing? We need to be able to build it at home. And that goes for our assault rifles and our tank and artillery shells, everything that the United States is embargoing. And so the one thing that has happened is that the Americans' refusal to provide us with steady resupply of these basic tools of war has convinced a majority of Israelis that Glick was right, that we need to rebuild our independent industrial capabilities. And that's why at the start of this year, the Defense Ministry announced the Independence Project, where we're going to be building, and I think we already are starting to build bombs for our Air Force, artillery and tank shells, assault rifles, and bullets for them in Israel, things that we hadn't done because of the MOU. So if they want to go ahead and do this, then they're just empowering the likes of me, which is okay. They want to label products from Judea and Samaria one of the things that Donald Trump did was he signed an executive order that requires products, Israeli-made products in Judea and Samaria to be labeled made in Israel. And they want it to be labeled made in, I don't know, occupied Palestine or something. They may want to recognize the state of Palestine. That, of course, would be a reward for October 7th. They want to open a consulate in Jerusalem for the Palestinians. They can't do that without Israeli permission, so they may just lay a cornerstone or something like that. That's what they're doing. So they're going to war against Israel. That's what this Magid article says, that the United States is now full on. They're siding with Hezbollah. They're siding with Iran. They want a ceasefire everywhere immediately. They want Israel to stand down. Why now? Why is it so urgent now to get a 21-day ceasefire in the north? To save Hezbollah from destruction. To save Hezbollah from destruction. It's hard to get your head around this. Who wants to get his head around this? I don't. But we have to, because, everything that they're saying, everything that they're doing, the peripatetic diplomacy that Biden and Blinken and all the rest of them are engaging in is geared towards one goal, which is getting Israel to stand down. And now, after what we've done, what we did accomplish over the past week in Lebanon, it's becoming obvious to the people of Israel that Prime Minister Netanyahu was not speaking empty words when he said that our objective is total victory. Hamas has not shot one projectile, knock wood, right? We have not gotten hit from Gaza since we seized the initiative in Lebanon. Why? Because they can't operate effectively as an offensive force so long as we control the Philadelphia corridor, blocking them from getting resupplied, and we control the Netzarim corridor, blocking them from rebuilding their force structure. That's why. Because we have maneuver forces still on the ground capable of taking action there, which is what we're doing. So they haven't been able to attack, which means that we've won in Gaza. We're not done. We can't walk away. But we did win. We are winning. And in Lebanon, look at Hezbollah. They're on the ground bleeding. What do? You kick them until they can't get up again, because Hezbollah has one goal, the annihilation of the Jews. And by the way, the annihilation of the United States and the entire free world, which is why they have terror cells in every single country, in Europe, in the United States, in Canada, in Latin America, and even in Asia. Because that's their goal. What do they say in Iran every day? What do they say in Beirut every day? Death to America, death to Israel. And here is the United States saying, no, we're going to protect you. We're going to keep you going. Israel, it has never been clearer. When we turned our attention to Hezbollah, when we were able to finally focus on Hezbollah, the big threat, 30 times the size of Gaza, right? This war was immediately transformed from a war only for Israel's survival to a war that protects the entire world from jihad. And obviously Iran, and this is my last point, of course they want a ceasefire now, because Hezbollah and Israel's fear, the fear that had been instilled in our hearts regarding Hezbollah for 30 years, right? That's Iran's insurance policy. So long as Israel believes that we will face an existential assault from Lebanon if we attack Iran's oil installations and their nuclear installations and their ballistic missile installations, we won't hit them, right? Because we'll be afraid that Hezbollah in the north is just going to lay waste to our cities and our people. But if they can't, then the path is open to Isfahan, to Natanz, to Qom, and to the rest of those areas that we have to attack in order to remove the menace of an Iranian regime with nuclear weapons and an absolute will to use them to kill every Jew in Israel, to destroy this country, and to assert their regional hegemony, which of course raises the question, what in the hell are the UAE and all the rest of them thinking when they're suing for a ceasefire? Don't they see we're serious? There's a reason that the public went nuts, and I'm talking about talking heads who hate Netanyahu and hate absolute victory and want us to lose so that he gets ousted from power. Even they were up in arms saying, we can't have a ceasefire because everybody understands it's finally time. The moment has arrived. We can do this. We got it. We can take care of Hezbollah. Netanyahu is speaking before the General Assembly, I think tomorrow, Friday. I can only imagine what he's going to say. All he has to do is remind the nations of the world, as Churchill reminded the United States after the fall of France, right, that the world's future is in our hands. It was in Britain's hands in 1940. It's in the hands of the State of Israel today in post-October 7th reality. Our survival is on the line, and that's why absolute victory, which we now see is a possibility, is what we're seeking. And if we achieve our goals, the world is going to be safe. Why is it? How can it possibly be that everybody wants us to stand down? Do they have a death wish? Is their hatred of Israel, their hatred of Jews, so great that they can't even see the basic reality that it's their lives as well that will be safeguarded? I leave you with that question, but I also tell you the answer. We're not standing down. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.